Hey guys, it's Mitch here, the lead developer of the 3D Hive Builder, and today we're going to be talking about the modify trigger. Now what's important is if you have not looked at the tutorial about checking and action conditions, then I would highly suggest that you go and look at that now before you look at this tutorial. And the reason I say that is because a modify trigger is basically a trigger in the world that lets you define check and action conditions. So I'm going to show you how to set one up, but I'm going to quickly go through the settings of the modify trigger, and it might not make sense to you if you have not done the checking and action conditions tutorial. So I would highly recommend go do that first. Alright, so you'll see that what I've already set up here is I've set up 2 inventory items. Now the modify trigger I'm going to work on at the moment basically means that the user should have one of these items, and if the user does have one of these items, then I basically just want to swap them around. So I'm basically swapping items in their inventory. So let's set that up. So the first thing we're going to do is create 2 inventory items, which I've already done. Follow the other tutorials if you don't know how to do that. And then I'm going to create a new blank trigger. I'm going to click on the area here to edit the settings. Okay, and I'm going to call this my swap trigger. Okay, so let's select the trigger type. The trigger type is modify. And the subcategory is modify. Okay, and so what you'll notice, the first thing you'll notice here is that the modify trigger is actually only a check and action condition panel. So this panel here. So basically it strips down all of the settings and allows you to just create checking conditions and action conditions. Alright, so I talked about what I wanted to achieve with this modify trigger, and what I wanted to achieve was the ability to swap the items from their inventory. If the user has the bread, I want to swap that item to milk, and if the user has milk, I want to swap the item that they've got into bread. So let's start this off. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a checking condition for the bread milk scenario. So you notice here that we've got a bunch of checking conditions. The checking condition for my particular format is the inventory check. So I'm going to click that. And you'll notice that what happens here is we get a blank template, like how when we create triggers or items, we get a blank template that we have to click to assign its settings. So I'm going to click on that. And now we've got a screen that has the inventory check condition name. This name is just for your reference, so you can name it to whatever you want. It won't be seen by the user, it's just literally there to help you out. So my first condition is the bread milk condition. So I'm going to first check if user has bread, and I'm going to select the bread item, and I'm going to save. So I've given a name that I know, I've selected the inventory item that this checking condition should check for, the bread, and I'm going to click save. Okay, so I've got my first checking condition here. Now my next instruction is that if that user does have the bread, I want to take that away from them and I want to give them the milk. Okay? So if they have the bread, I'm going to take the bread away and I'm going to give them the milk. So the first thing I need to do is take the item. So if the user has bread, my next action condition, you'll notice that an action condition is defined by a plus. I'm going to take the item, take the bread item, and I'm going to select the bread item, save that, and then I'm going to give them the milk. So that's because I'm doing something to the player. It's not a check, it's called an action. So I'm going to now give the player the milk. Alright, select the milk inventory item. Okay, great. So what you see here now, let's go through this. We have a modify trigger called the swap trigger. Now, the word swap is not part of the modify trigger, it's just what I want the modify trigger to do. And all the modify trigger has is a check and actions condition panel, right? And this is how I've set it up. The first thing I need to do is I need to check whether the user has the bread. That's the first step. If that is true, then I want to take the bread item away from their inventory, which is the second step. And then once that's complete, then I want to give the player the item of milk. Okay? And basically what this is doing is going, if you have bread, I'm going to take it from your inventory and I'm going to put the milk into your inventory. And so if we wanted to do the opposite of that, our inventory check would be checking the milk first, and then we would be taking the milk in this condition, and then the next action condition would be giving the bread. So it's very similar, it's pretty much the same way. So you'll notice that the strength of the checking and action conditions, and why I wanted you to have a look at that tutorial beforehand, because the modified trigger basically lets you do anything that the managed check and action conditions can do. And it's all related to items in your item library. Great, so I'm going to save the changes. You'll notice that it appears here as a modify trigger. And obviously to place this on our map is fairly straightforward. Menu options, we click the back button, make sure that our triggers tab is selected, and you'll notice that our modify trigger is here. So I'm going to click that and place it on the map. Great, so there we have it. Swap trigger setup. This is the modify trigger that has checking and action conditions for particular items. And that's how we kind of create swapping conditions. Now, modify trigger is very open to how you want it to be. You can do things like give the player health, give the player stamina, take coins, give coins. You know, there's a whole bunch of things that we can do here with the modify trigger, but this is one scenario that can be played out. So use your imagination, be creative, and the modify trigger will be an open source for doing a lot of things in your game and your level design. Great, guys. Cheers.